How can I know the presence of God in dark times? We've done several short answer videos looking at the whole question of if God exists, why is there suffering? But I think that kind of philosophical approach doesn't always help us when we're actually going through difficult, dark times, when suffering strikes. Then the question many of us have is, how can I live with that? How can I know God's presence right in that moment? And the Christian faith, I think, speaks uniquely to the whole question and problem of suffering. Sometimes our atheist friends raise the problem of suffering as if it's a surprise to Christians, but suffering is built right into the Christian faith. As our friend Rebecca McLaughlin, author of many books, once wrote, she said most of the Bible is written by suffering people to suffering people about a God who has suffered. And, Jesus' ministry culminated in suffering and pain and execution. The first Christians, persecuted heavily by the Roman Empire, they knew what it meant to suffer. Throughout Christian history, there's been plagues and pandemics and wars, and Christians have lived through that, trusting and knowing that God is good, even when all around is in chaos. And today, as Christianity, one of the fastest growing religions in the world, most Christians live in places where they face persecution or oppression for their Christian faith. So Christians are not surprised by the whole question of suffering. And when we experience suffering, one of the things I love as a Christian is there are places in the Bible I can go for real help and real resources. The book of Job, there in the heart of the Old Testament, an amazing book about suffering, but not about so much about why there is suffering, but about how to live faithfully through suffering. It's an amazing resource when we go through hard times. Or the book of Psalms, the prayer book, the song book of the Old Testament. There are wonderful psalms in there, songs of praise for when life is going well. But there are also very raw, very honest psalms there that we can turn to as a resource when we struggle to pray when things are going in a way that's difficult and tough. And the psalms don't shy away from that. And as somebody whose academic career has been spent studying Islam and the Quran and engaged in comparative religion, one of the things I'm struck by when you look at Islam and you look at the Quran, there is no permission given there for Muslims to cry out to Allah and complain and say, hang on a moment, what's going on? Why is the world so upside down? But you turn to the Psalms, we have permission to shake our fist at heaven. We have permission to lament. We have a language there to use when life doesn't seem fair, when it doesn't seem as if things are going the right way, when it seems as if God is absent. And then, of course, we turn to the New Testament and we have Jesus. And one of the most helpful passages I found in the New Testament for dealing with this question of how we live with suffering comes in John chapter 11, where Jesus has gone to visit his friends Mary and Martha, whose brother Lazarus, one of Jesus' dear friends, has just died. And as Jesus stands outside the tomb of Lazarus, and we know as we read on in that chapter that Jesus is about to perform an incredible miracle and bring Lazarus back to life again, nevertheless, faced with the outcome of disease and death, what does Jesus do? He weeps there at the tomb of his friend and then moves on to do the miracle. And I think that chapter of the Bible is saying that so often the path to hope and joy and celebration does go through suffering. And Jesus himself walks that same path when he hung there on the cross, dying for the sins of the world, and quotes from one of those Old Testament Psalms, Psalm 22, great psalm of lament, when Jesus on the cross prays, my God, why have you forsaken me? But of course we know the cross was not the last word, because then comes Easter and the resurrection, the beginning of God beginning to put right all that has gone wrong with the world. And what I think Christianity can uniquely say when suffering comes. If you're an atheist and you face suffering, the best you can do is say, well, nature is red in tooth and claw, that's just the way of the world. If you're a Muslim, the best you can say is, inshallah, Allah can do what he wants. But as a Christian, you can say, suffering isn't right. It's not fair. I want to protest. And there are places in the Bible you can draw upon to do that. But you also know that suffering and pain are not the last words. Because of the resurrection of Christ, we have a hope and a certainty and a confidence that suffering is not the last word. Hope and joy are the last words. And we also know that in Jesus we have a God who has walked the path of suffering, who, as Psalm 23 says, can come alongside us even when we go through the darkest of times. And though everything around us may be in chaos, we can know that presence of God with us right in the middle of suffering as we walk through that valley of darkness, knowing that it may be some time before we see hope again, but that the hope will come because of Jesus.